Up next, Authentically Detroit sits down with David Alade, co-founder and chief executive officer at Century Partners, to discuss his opinion piece in Crain's Detroit. Now is the time to equitably address Detroit's housing deficiencies. But first, this week's hot takes from Bridge Detroit and Planet Detroit. Detroit among most impacted cities in the country for the urban heat island effect, and state regulators approve settlement in DTE Energy's plan. What it means. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages.
Hey, it's Stephen Henderson from WDET and Bridge Detroit. If you love listening to Orlando and Donna's incisive interviews and conversations on the Authentically Detroit podcast, I hope you'll also listen to the podcast I host, Detroit Today, from WDET on Detroit's NPR station. Detroit Today is a daily podcast where I talk with community leaders, elected officials, and residents of Detroit, the region, and the state about politics and the values that animate our communities. Listen to Detroit Today every day on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show.
Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the Cast Corridor at the WDET studios. We are a content partner to BridgeDetroit.com. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Davidson.
You almost forgot what your name was.
I don't remember my name. It's been a long weekend.
It's only Monday. Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. Today, Donna and I are joined by David Alade, the co-founder and CEO of Century Partners. Last week, David ruffled a few feathers when Crain's Detroit Business published his opinion piece. Now is the time to equitably address Detroit's housing deficiencies. So we figured, why not bring him on the show to discuss it further? David, welcome back to Authentically Detroit.
Thank you. I hope I didn't ruffle too many feathers there.
You made me so happy. I read that and I was just like, yes, this is finally somebody is really making the kind of demands that need to be made on our city. For the past, 7 years since I've been at ECN, I feel like I've been screaming into an empty whatever because nobody listens.
Empty tunnel.
Empty tunnel. Nobody's listening. We talk about the housing crisis. You read about the housing crisis, and we're not doing anything about the housing crisis. And actually, I saw you speak. I didn't really meet you in 2016 when you were presenting at a social justice conference at Wayne State. I remember going there and really being interested that you would come to Detroit with some ideas for how you were going to address it. And I keep waiting for people to address it. And between then and now, it feels as though your clarity around what's needed has become so much more crystallized. And you did take the effort to speak, not just on behalf of yourself, but on behalf of READ, which is an organization we want to hear more about, to say, do better, City of Detroit.
I love it. Welcome back, David.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
Thank you for having me. I feel great.
Yeah?
I feel a little tired.
What you tired from?
I have a 3-month-old.
This is Maverick's dad, y'all.
This is my grandbaby's daddy.
That's Maverick's dad. Donna talks about Maverick all the time on the show.
He's, I have to say, objectively, from a purely biased perspective, he's the cutest baby out right now. I have to say.
The cutest baby out.
He's keeping us up at all times during the night, but it's been a joy and a challenge adjusting to this journey of fatherhood. But it's been awesome.
Love it. Donna, how are you? You almost forgot your name. I'm really interested
I did
to
almost forget my name.
See how you are doing.
I don't know. I'm busy.
Yeah.
I'm happy. It's been a good year, but I'm taking vacation next week.
Oh, good for you.
I'm really, really, really excited about
How was
that.
your weekend?
My weekend was good. We went to a concert. I really like going to little small concert venues, and there's a concert venue in Ann Arbor. I'm trying to remember the name of it. The
Blind Pig?
No, it's not the Blind Pig anymore. It's a new venue, just opened up a couple years ago, And there was a performer named Brandon Rose, who is a bass player. And if George Duke and Stanley Clark came together, they would have produced Brandon Rose. He is amazing. And he also has an amazing singing voice. So that was a lot of fun. It was a date night with Kevin, our first real date night since we've been
grandparents.
Since we moved, and being grandparents and since we moved. So it was a really special day. And then yesterday, I cooked and almost cut off my finger. But other than that, I'm good. How was your weekend?
Please be careful. We do not need you cutting body parts off of yourself. Goodness
I got
gracious.
this new knife set. And for somebody as clumsy as myself,
you don't need a new knife set.
But it cuts really well.
I know. Stay away from the knives, Donna
My
Davis Davidson.
finger really
Sheesh.
How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. So on Saturday, some of the youngsters in my family got baptized, and that was really, really special. A special time in the family. And yesterday I got to hang out with some friends of mine that I have not had the opportunity to hang out. They built a house. I had to pack a snack to travel out here. Goodness gracious. They were in Van Buren. They built a house in Van Buren Township, right near Belleville. And they have a 2-year-old daughter. And it was a good time to hang out with my friends. And so it was a pretty fun and relaxing and heart-filled weekend. Yeah. So it's Monday, and it's a beautiful Monday here in the city of Detroit. So anytime I had the opportunity to step outside, I most certainly did that. So I'm feeling good.
We spent the yesterday and part of Saturday on the patio that now Kevin has planted flowers and done other things, and that's beautiful. The name of the club is the Blue Llama Jazz Club. Okay. And if you have not been to the Blue Llama, it is the place to go. It's absolutely wonderful.
Okay. Visit the Blue Llama in Ann Arbor to get some Now, do they got seats? See, I like small concert venues too, but I want small concert venues with seats. I don't want to be standing up the whole time because I'm too old. I aged out.
Yeah, it's actually all of the seats are great. The way it's been designed, the seats are all great. The music is great. You can either order a prefix meal in advance or you can order off the menu. Their food is amazing. It's got great food, great drinks, great atmosphere. Definitely seats. You have to be seated in it. So if you think of some of the other jazz clubs that you've gone to where they offer dinner.
Like the Dirty Dog.
Like the Dirty Dog. It's like the Dirty Dog, but much more upscale.
Oh, okay. All right. Got to check it out in Ann Arbor, A2.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. It's time for Hot Takes. Hot Takes, where we run down some of the week's top headlines in the city of Detroit. For Hot Takes, Detroit among most impacted cities in the country for the urban heat island effect. This is by Brian Allnut from Planet Detroit. That was also published in Bridge Detroit because we're partners. The term heat dome has gained wider currency over the last few years as increasingly brutal heat waves have hit various parts of the globe, creating conditions that scientists say would be virtually impossible without climate change. This summer, a prolonged heat dome has baked much of Southwest and the South, including Phoenix, which has experienced 26 straight days of over 110-degree temperatures. Heat domes occur when a high-pressure system moves into an area, pressing warm air toward the ground. This high-pressure bubble can divert storm systems, creating a static weather pattern with mostly clear skies that amplify the heat. The head of the National Weather Service's Forecast Operations Branch, Greg Carvin, said that high pressure adds to the warming part of the compressional warming. It's like adding air pressure to a car tire. As air is compressed by higher pressure, it heats up, he said. While experts say Michigan isn't yet a prime target for extended heat dome, the odds are increasing with global heating. In the meantime, the area could see stronger storms that tend to occur to the north of these superheated areas. And long term, Metro Detroit could be highly vulnerable to an extended heat wave because of factors like health disparities in low-income areas and communities of color. The region's ongoing problem with unreliable power and an urban and suburban heat island effect, which can amplify a heat wave's impact. Children, the elderly, and those with heart, respiratory, or kidney disease are especially at risk. This week's heat coincides with a new analysis from Climate Central showing 86% of neighborhoods in Detroit and many entering suburbs experience an increase in temperatures of 8 degrees Fahrenheit or more because of the heat island effect. The effect refers to the tendency of areas heavily covered by hard surfaces like roads, buildings, and other infrastructure to trap heat and warm the surrounding area, an impact that can especially be powerful at night. Brady speculated that a lack of green space could account for Detroit's strong heat island effect. Trees and other vegetation can help cool cities by directly shading buildings and structures that would otherwise absorb heat. Plants can also cool the surrounding area through evapotranspiration. I said that right, where water taken up by vegetation is emitted into the air and provides evaporative cooling. I have some things to say about this. I know you do too, Donna. Donna, what say you?
Well, I mean, I think that a central part of this article that we need to talk about is the idea that they can just look at Detroit and model Detroit after other cities and look at parks, because the reality is a lot of green space in Detroit has been adopted as side lots by Detroiters, or, large parcels have been turned into places like Bailey Park, which will not show up in a map that they have. And so I think it's important for us to really get some Detroit detail. I think it would be a great kind of community research project to have people who live in the communities really map what is the temperature outside in these various parts of the community to test the hypothesis that it's always hotter in places in Detroit to the extent that they say that it is. But even if it's not, we know that Detroiters are going to be heat vulnerable because of the condition of housing, because of a lack of transportation, because of a lack of air conditioning, and all of the other things that prevent that kind of damage. And the other thing is that the air pollution is so significant that we already, I don't know if the EPA has changed its standards, but at one point we were in a non-attainment zone. Now the EPA has just decided to loosen regulations so that we don't know if we're attaining good air quality, but we know that we have the highest asthma rates in the state of Michigan, in the part of Detroit where ECN is located. And so this is a concern that as you see rising temperatures, and that is the reason why we've established the Stoudemire as a wellness hub. And we've worked with the city of Detroit and Elevate to create an resilient East Side initiative to try to create wellness hubs in as many places as possible, so that in the event of these rising temperatures and this heat effect or heat dome effect, people have a place to go and be safe.
You know, one of the things that I'll say about this, and this is probably, okay, so what denotes a sense of place and wealth for me all the time in every city that I go to are trees. You go to a place and you see tree-lined streets. Yeah. That means that you are in a place, right? In a place that's almost always, wealthy or middle class. And you ride down the streets of Detroit, right? And you hardly see trees.
Well, if you do a tree cover map,
yeah,
and you look at a tree cover map, you can see where Indian Village is, right?
Yeah.
You can see where West Village is. You can see where certain communities are by the fact that you still have really effective tree cover. There are actually wealthier areas in Detroit that don't have tree cover because they're newer. And we have not always educated people about trees. And sometimes those places are in places with a lot of pollution. A lot of times the remedy that they're talking about is planting trees, and I definitely believe we need more trees, but we have got to figure out how to deal with dead trees before the community is going to really embrace the need for more live trees, because a lot of people are very resistant to that. Now, in a shameless plug for the Wright Museum, there is a new exhibit called the D Tree exhibit, and they talk about the value of dead trees. There's actually a marketable value of dead trees. And so if we realign our thinking from when will the city tear this tree down to how can I sell my dead tree to somebody who actually needs this wood, maybe we could do some work. And so I actually have another pilot project I'm considering trying to work on, and that is a project that helps people sell the wood and the dead trees in their yards, because we definitely need new trees. It will take 10 to 15 years for those trees to provide any reasonable cover. But in the meantime, I like the idea of painting people's roofs white to the extent that people have roofs that are intact. And
what does that do? I haven't heard of that.
Well, that was one of the recommendations here, that painting a roof white actually helps to reduce the heat dome effect. And so I think that there are some interim solutions as we wait for trees to grow. But I really do agree with others that we need to educate Detroiters about the value of trees, and also stop trees from impeding the livelihoods of people. And, one of the stories we're going to talk about is DTE. And one of the challenges,
they've torn down so many trees.
And every time you have a power outage, they blame the trees. And then you tell people, get a tree. And people are like, no, I don't need a tree.
I don't want my power out. David, you have anything on this?
it's kind of scary, to be honest. I think about it. Clearly, real estate is where I spend most of my time. I think about as we're within a significant housing shortage and crisis, how we need to incorporate energy efficient building topologies, green certified building into our housing stock. I mean, our housing stock is incredibly old. Mm-hmm. I think 70% of Detroit's housing stock is at least 50 years old. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about refurbishing, revitalizing the neighborhood, you can either build anew or you can, reinvigorate what already exists. And the process of reinvigorating using kind of modern building types and green efficient building topologies is not easy. It takes significant investment, takes significant resources. And right now, developers actually aren't incentivized properly to build in a way that can future-proof our neighborhoods from an environmental perspective. So that's definitely one of the things I'm focused on, and we try to, align and insert, green efficiency in our building strategies. But it's a challenge.
I mean, that's a great tease for some of the policy work and advocacy that REIT is doing, and I can't wait to get into it because it's just I love that, and I love that you guys are thinking about that. Go ahead.
And I think it's a great opportunity for partnership, too, with organizations like ours that are also thinking about that because we are learning about technologies. You're learning about technologies, and you have, a continuum of things that can be done. Some of them are more expensive. Some of them are less expensive. If all you do is paint the roof white, maybe it's not as attractive in some ways, but maybe that is one of the ways, less expensive way to upgrade a home. I'd like to explore what that looks like more, having looked at that. And I just want to also shout out our staff at ECN. I want to shout out Angela Brown Wilson and Sparkle Berry for their work in helping to upgrade homes and install energy efficiency devices. We've done a really good job of helping to upgrade homes. I think we did 100 homes last year. We're looking at more this year. And actually, we are able to put air conditioning in many more homes now.
Wow.
So it's exciting to me, but a lot of our homes will struggle with that challenge. We'll have a challenge. Now, the other thing I learned is that there are income restrictions for the homes we can upgrade. But for those that are receiving air conditioning, there are no more income restrictions.
Nice.
And so I'm really excited.
What's the number? 313-571-2800. Call it.
313-571-2800. We've got to get our homes upgraded as quickly as possible because this is scary.
Yeah.
And when you have a community of people with fragile health and you have as many bad air days as we've had this summer, you know that it's important. Also, we operate a resilience hub. And so if anybody's listening and you know somebody who needs to get out of bed, hot air because they don't have air conditioning in their homes, no way to cool their homes, please give us a call as well, and we'll try to connect you to our space or to another space in your community. Do not stay home and say, I'm going to ride this out.
Yeah.
Because your body may not agree.
Yeah, I feel it. For hot takes, state regulators approved settlement in DTE Energy's plan. What it means, this is by Nina Ignazak at Planet Detroit. The Michigan Public Service Commission has given the green light to a settlement agreement that shapes the future of electricity for 2.3 million DTE electric customers over the next 20 years, secures payments for low-income bill assistance and energy-efficient improvements, and requires disclosure on political donations. The agreement will close DTE's coal-fired Monroe Power Plant in 2032, 3 years ahead of schedule, and includes commitments to build more renewable energy and battery storage faster. Low-income customers may be eligible for additional bill assistance and help with energy efficiency and renewables due to $38 million in funds secured for nonprofits that serve them as part of the settlement. An additional $70 million will support DTE's low-income energy efficiency programs. Under the new deal, customers interested in installing solar panels and selling excess energy back to the grid will have more time. The agreement increased the cap for the required purchase of excess energy from residential solar owners from 1% to 6% of the utility's peak load. The agreement also authorizes a plan allowing DTE to continue to secure a return on its investment in its Monroe plant, which sparked criticism among some interveners. The agreement gives DTE the right to charge ratepayers for a profit on the Monroe coal plant for 15 years, even after it's shut down. John Richer, a senior policy analyst with the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Authority, one of the interveners in the case, previously told Planet Detroit. The agreement results from intervention by 21 environmental, business, and labor organizations. Independent energy consultant Jackson Copel, who served as an expert witness and negotiator in the case, outlined Clean Energy Advocates' priorities that were not achieved as part of the IRP process, including affordability for ratepayers. We have not done anything policy-wise in this settlement that is helping to guarantee we're getting that to that 6% of the income goal outlined in the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan, he said, referring to the state's goal to limit the cost burden from powering and heating homes to not more than 6% of the annual income for low-income households. Copel noted that affordability is a critical issue in this $622 million rate increase request now pending before the Michigan Public Service Commission. That case was filed in January and is set to be decided by November. Advocates also hope to negotiate standards that empower the Michigan Public Service Commission to consider equity, climate, and affordability in its decisions to secure better outage compensation for customers who lose power for extended periods, to secure enabling of community solar in Michigan, and remove the cap on distributed solar and batteries. Want to hear what Donna and I think about this story? Keep it locked, because Authentically Detroit will be right back.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the Neighborhood Tech Hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit. By Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Welcome back to Authentically Detroit. We are here with David Alade, and we just ran down a story by Nina Ignazak at Planet Detroit. State regulators approved settlement in DTE Energy's plan, and what that means. Donna, what say you?
Well, I'm giving Jackson Copel a standing ovation now.
Okay.
When people think activism doesn't matter, he has done such a great job in outlining.
He's been unrelenting
issues with what's wrong with our power grid. There's so much more to this, but he has been a critic. So I think it's important to have people who fight on behalf of community. I also want to say that a lot of times people look at politics as Tweedledee and Tweedledum. For 40 consecutive years, we had Republicans in charge of every part of Michigan. Mm-hmm. And the Michigan Public Service Commission, which is appointed by the governor, reflected industry. Mm-hmm. And under this current governor, you have a Michigan Public Service Commission that is actually willing to listen to the people. They actually came out to ECN last August to find out what we thought about things. Not all of them, but a couple of them went on a community tour. Joel Harani Harris, in one of his last acts on his last day of office, brought them to our offices, and we had a chance to discuss that with them. So advocacy has helped to improve so many conditions. We're now looking at community solar as something possible. People can sell it back more easily. There's more money that's being put into more innovative solutions. They're going to make some of these improvements faster, but we're not even close to being there because there are still some households in Michigan right now that don't have power. And so we can't let our foot up off the gas pedal just because we've seen progress. Climate change won't let us. We just had a whole conversation about what's happening with the heat dome. And you can't solve the problem with the heat dome without electricity. Last week, a national reporter reached out and was trying to do a story on people who didn't have air conditioning in Detroit. And I said, you do realize there's a lot of Detroiters who don't have power right now. So if you have air conditioning in your home and you don't have power,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter. And so making sure that our energy systems are more reliable. Today, I also read in the Free Press, there was a story by Neil Rubin about modernization of DTE, and I had no idea what he was talking about, because modernization means you don't have all these overhanging wires that you are burying some of the electricity below ground, so that when there's wind or when there are rodents, you're not creating these techniques to get the rodents to resist the wires. You actually are burying the wires like you do in many places. So I think the DTE has to move beyond public relations and get into real solutions for people in our community. And they're not going to get there on their own, because they are an investor-owned public utility. They are not owned by the people, and that's the significance of the Michigan Public Service Commission.
Yeah, I too want to give a really quick shout out to all of the activists who played a major part in making sure that they got all these wins. $38 million into community-led programs to assist low-income customers, $30 million allocated in energy assistance, $8 million to support organizations providing solar and battery installations, an additional $70 million in energy efficiency funding toward programs for income-qualified customers. I mean, Solidarity and the other group, We Want Green, and I think Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice may have had a hand in this. I mean, hats off for holding, this utility that has, and I got in a lot of trouble for this, and I'll say it again, that has a monopoly on Detroit's power grid. It's not a critique. It is the truth. And so when we have a monopoly like that, we have to have activism to keep that power accountable. Pun intended, power accountable. David, what say you?
Yeah, I think about it. So we recently bought a house in the Boston Edison neighborhood, and DTE actually has buried the power lines in front of our home. We didn't know they had done that prior to purchasing. If you look, anytime there's a significant storm, our street will have power and one right over will not. So I think about what Donna mentioned about the tree canopy. DTE, they are trimming a lot of trees, but if we had more kind of underground infrastructure, that'll hit two things. Yeah. One, we'd have more consistent power whenever we do have these natural semi-disasters. And two, we'll be able to preserve that tree canopy, which is ever so critical these days.
Has there been a cost analysis of what it would cost to bury the power line?
No, it will be extremely expensive, but I think that we have to look at cost benefit. And, we can spend $1 billion.
Cost benefit analysis.
Right, a cost benefit analysis.
For the correction.
Because we look at, what is the cost benefit for spending $1 billion to tear down housing? Has anybody shown the economic benefit? Has anybody shown the health benefit? Has anybody shown the well-being benefit on citizens? We prioritize those things that we decide matter. And so I think one of the things I want to do more is engage in more cost-benefit analysis and also really stop acting like things are impossible. We found out a whole lot of things were possible when COVID happened.
We sure did.
We found out we didn't have to shut out people's water. We didn't have to shut off people's electricity. We didn't have to evict people. And there's been some backlash and some repercussions from that. But I think that the problem is we aim low, and we are dealing with a climate that is not really complying with our time frames. So I think it's important for us to understand that we've got to move things forward. And I also want to shout out Alex Hill, because he was on our show last year.
Hill, man.
And Alex was bringing maps and trying to bring knowledge. The Sierra Club was doing the same. So many activists have been on the front lines for so long. And a lot of times, again, it's a thankless task because you feel like you can never move the needle forward, and we did. And so I'm really proud of those people who acted on that behalf. I'm proud of our staff who are working in this area, Ricky Ackerman and Aaron Stanley, for their work in climate activism, and we just need more of it.
Yeah, it's so funny because I didn't realize that this kind of work is still very segmented, and I'm hoping that our listeners and residents listening will begin to really embrace a broad understanding of what it means to be in community development. And that means that climate equity and this kind of talk is absolutely necessary, right? When we talk about utility, when we talk about coal, when we talk about environmental justice and injustice and racism, it all comes together in community development. And I had the opportunity to MC a TED conference, the Countdown Summit here a couple of weeks ago. And it really is, what it means is the countdown to 2050. 2050. The goal is to be zero carbon in 2050, and it's an audacious goal, right? And it's supposed to be. But, folks were talking about this very thing.
Were there community development executive directors who were speaking at the tech conference?
There was Anika Goss.
She's not community development.
LaPrisha Daniels.
She's not community development.
DWEJ.
See, the thing is, community development is a sector I'm in.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we get shut out of all the conversations.
Yeah.
People say, well, and I love Anika and I love LaPrisha and I work with both of them. They are not community development. The people working in the community, organizing people in the community to improve their community. And when you look at community development and sustainability and you just Google it, you'll find yourself looking at stuff that's happening in India. You'll find yourself looking at the Philippines and Asia. But in the United States, it's siloed. Either you are community development or you're working on environmentalism. And you're absolutely right. It needs to come together. And that means that people who are convening conversations have to ask people like myself, perhaps, to have some of that conversation, but I'm not invited to the table, and nor are my peers, and therefore you can't really integrate it if we're not sharing what we're doing.
Love it.
And we're doing a lot at ECN, by the way. So I think it was a big miss when TED came to town and decided that they had the people they needed, and we weren't part of that.
Yeah, love it.
Because we have a national reputation for what we're doing in terms of merging community development and environmental sustainability, and they should know that.
Yeah, they should. Well, she just told them. All right. If you have
they
any,
know now.
They know now.
If they know.
If they didn't know,
Now they know.
You know. If you remember that saying in the night, if you don't know, now you know. That's Biggie, right? To quote the illustrious, notorious B.I.G. If you have stories that you want to talk about on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit, at Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. All right, so we are here with David Alade. David is the co-founder and chief executive officer at Century Partners, where he combines commitment to community, legacy, and purpose with a dedication to building a culture of sustainable excellence. In the summer of 2014, he visited Detroit and fell in love with the energy and charisma of its people and the beauty of its historic homes. Recognizing a mass undervaluing of the city, he began to invest in its neighborhoods, all the while building relationships with residents. David also recognized in Detroit an unfair reality had become all too familiar, that he had I can't read this. David also recognized in Detroit an unfair reality he had become all too familiar with as a child as he navigated the two drastically different worlds of the Queens neighborhood he was from and the elite Manhattan environment he was going to school in. The only gap that existed between the two was not an inherent ability gap, but quite simply an opportunity gap. Here in Detroit was the chance to take part in the redressing of this inequity. I got it right in the end. David, let's talk, man.
Man, that's a good bio. Man,
that is. Who wrote it? You wrote it? That was nice.
It's a team effort.
It's a team effort. David got a team. You know what I'm saying? I need help. You know what I mean? So we were really excited and enthused about the article that you wrote in Cranes. But before we talk about the article you penned, we have some, questions. We want to make sure that people are caught up with your ever-evolving role in the community. So you founded Century Partners at a time when Detroit was just recovering from bankruptcy and emergency management. What was your initial view of the Detroit housing market when you got here?
I thought it was incredible. I remember I was in New York. But prior to moving here, I covered the auto companies, working for the banks. So I'd probably pop into Detroit once a quarter from 2009 to 2015. Mostly in Metro Detroit, some of the suburbs. Whenever we'd come downtown. It was only starting really in 2014. I really got to see what was happening in the neighborhoods and really spent time engaging with folks who lived in the neighborhoods, looking at the architecture, of the neighborhoods, trying to figure out why is this property here worth one block over? It's $100,000 and the block where it is now it's worth $10,000. It seemed like a huge complex puzzle, and you combine sort of that puzzle with the history of Detroit. This was such an amazing land of opportunity for Black folks from an economic perspective, a political perspective. This was a land of innovation. from a technology perspective. It was the Silicon Valley of the world, for so long. To me, to have an opportunity to participate in the city's comeback, to work with folks of color, with Black people in neighborhoods, helping rebuild their neighborhoods. This was a place where so much Black wealth was created. We're now in a massive wealth inequality space. I thought Detroit and the work that we do in Detroit could play a role in helping to address some of that inequity, primarily via its housing.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Detroit, and people don't realize this, is they keep saying Detroit shrank. Detroit shrank, Detroit shrank. Well, first of all, we're still 139 square miles plus or minus. But the also reality is that we have just about as many Black Detroiters here as we did in 1960. They just live in the suburbs, right? So we have expanded. The population has shifted. And as it shifted, there's still pockets of Black wealth and well-being. This is not a metro area full of poor people, but in a lot of instances, the people who had resources ended up moving out. The Black middle class ended up following the middle class into the suburbs, leaving some of the neighborhoods that they once occupied under housed, right, or without a lot of housing. And so there was this opportunity in neighborhoods that had been historically Black to bring them back to their former glory. And a lot of Detroiters wanted to see that. And so when you came here, you started on one street, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. We started on a street called Atkinson Street, which is just south of the Boston Edison neighborhood. And what we thought is if we could buy a couple of properties on this street, maybe if we worked with people who lived in the neighborhood, if we got our friends and family to invest alongside with us, if we hired locally, local contractors, if we hired people who were just on the block, who were maybe potentially a little underemployed, that we could see the neighborhood shift in a pretty meaningful way. And over time, we hope that would lead to a decrease in the kind of massive price difference between Atkinson and a neighbor to the block to the north, actually, where I live now, on Edison Street. And so that's what we did. We started with one house, 1665 Atkinson Street. My business partner, mentor, co-founder, Andrew Colomb, actually moved into the house. So we lived in the neighborhood that we were developing in. And we started with about 6 houses in 2014. We moved to Detroit in 2015 and just started getting to work. We saw that if we hired people, if we could solve some of those problems that we thought were creating and driving that price divergence, which was, loitering, the vacancy, the abandoned housing, the aesthetics of the neighborhood. If we could renovate houses, get the neighbors to buy into what we were doing, if we could get good tenants who respected their neighbors, respected the community, and if we could do high quality renovations. At that time, there were a lot of slum loading that was happening in that neighborhood. We thought that we could at least accelerate what that neighborhood could be, and the economics would follow. And that's what happened between 2015 and 2016. We renovated about 17 houses on Atkinson Street between the Lodge and Linwood. And exactly what we thought would happen kind of happened. We hired a bunch of folks. We got really great tenants. We saw the prices start to creep up. And most interestingly, we saw residents who lived in the neighborhood a long time, now that the price of their homes was increasing, it now made economic sense for them to reinvest in some of the critical capital investments, like a roof, a porch. Some of the things when you're driving through a neighborhood immediately catch your eye. And so aesthetically, even the neighborhood began to really improve pretty quickly. And then we replicated that strategy in a number of neighborhoods, teaming up with a resident of the North End. We had him as an equity investor into our fund, also hired him so that he could break off from his larger construction company, this is Stephen Harris, to start a smaller construction company with a focus on hiring returning citizens. And so we were able to not only capitalize his efforts so that he could start the construction company, he could hire the folks he wanted to hire who lived in the neighborhood, and he also had that economic freedom and was able to now, with the capitalization, own still a piece of the properties that he sold to us, and rebuild his neighborhood in a high quality way according to the standards and specifications that he thought the neighborhood warranted. So we've been able to do that through a number of neighborhoods in Detroit. It's a lot of hard work, and we hasn't been a perfect journey, but I think we've been really, really successful. I think we've been able to hire a lot of people locally, and hopefully we continue to make a difference.
I mean,
All
the
right,
journey
we're
could
gonna
never.
put a button right there. We're gonna take our last break of the show, and we have some more questions and topics of discussion for David. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit. We'll be right back.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the neighborhood tech hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
All right, we are Authentically Detroit, and we are back with David Alade. Donna, you were getting ready to ask a question.
Yeah, so, the intersection of Atkinson and Rosa Parks Boulevard has special resonance in our community.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the congregation. I'm talking about the other side of Atkinson. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh,
You can talk about the
congregation.
You better
You can.
tread carefully. We love the congregation.
Oh, no,
now.
but yes, listen, the congregation is awesome, but there's also this
Yes,
park just across
absolutely.
the street
Yes.
that is part of our history, and
Talk
a lot
about
of
it.
people don't know about that.
Yeah, talk about it.
Yeah, it's a site of the rebellion.
Yeah.
So that the rebellion is the bloodiest. I think the event with the most lives lost, second only to the 1863 draft. So there's no more bloodshed in an event in U.S. history.
Well, that's not true.
Yes.
Listen. I know about Black Wall Street. I know about what happened there. That's
Rosewood.
history. Rosewood. If you talk
Yeah.
about what happened where my grandmother used to live in East St. Louis in 1917. History books tend to report Detroit riots or rebellions that were initiated by Black people separately from the racial pogroms that they initiated, where they wiped out whole populations. They shot everybody on sight in East St. Louis, and many people died. They burned them to death. People died in the river, jumping in the river to save their lives, and they didn't count them. And so the reality is, like in Tulsa, nobody has a good count of how many people were killed in Tulsa. It is the largest one. And I think I just want to correct that history, because having researched what happened to my grandmother's people in East St. Louis and what happened in Tulsa, where they were dropping literal bombs inside of neighborhoods, we don't know how many lives were lost. Or in Rosewood, Florida. We don't know how many lives were lost because our people didn't even count enough for them to capture. But it is one of the most bloody ones.
But finish your point. Finish the point you were making.
So we had an opportunity. I think that moment, obviously, if you look at the population loss in Detroit, and actually started before 67. It started as early as the 50s. I think that point certainly accelerated, the loss of population. So we, the ability to be able to, we have a house that's actually right on the corner on Atkinson and Rosa Parks. That's one of my favorite houses. So I do feel a tremendous amount of honor just to be on the street, to be part of this history. To think about a place that was the driver, accelerant for a lot of was white flight, maybe even black flight in Detroit's neighborhood, to be able to bring people back where they feel proud to be a resident, of Atkinson Street. They want to benefit from the new amenities that are there and be part of the history. To me,
It's Rosa Parks and Claremont, but it was 12th in Claremont in 1967, and folks. I don't know if everybody always understands, that Rosa Parks is 12th Street.
Yes,
that
thank you.
intersection,
Yes, and so I think the significance of that is also that my mother. I actually, when the rebellion happened, I lived on Chicago Boulevard, 3 houses from the corner of 12th Street, which is now Rosa Parks, and I remember that as my first real memory is having to crawl under the windows to avoid getting shot, and my mother telling me that, don't stand up and walk by the windows because somebody might kill you. And driving down out of town and seeing tanks in the street. It was a traumatizing period. And at that time, you had the Vietnam War going on and all that stuff. So, but what I want to talk about is my mother's memories. In honor of my mother, she remembered the loss. The streets that were just denuded of houses and trees and everything. And there was just sheer sense of loss that a community had been destroyed after that. And so to see that community be, put back together in many ways and be renewed right at that site. I believe that, Claremont is one block north or south of Atkinson, right? So it's, and 12th Street. So it's right there at the epicenter of that park that separates it between Claremont and Atkinson now has a memorial to that. But to see that area revitalized means a lot to people who were part of that community, and you're helping to rebuild actually from the epicenter of the loss. That's something significant about that.
I think we're at the very beginning. I mean, if you look at Congregation, that place
this is the beginning.
That place is popping.
It
and
is.
if you look at, there's a ton of, I think, part of the reason that drew me to Detroit was I thought that there wasn't nearly enough understanding of what true demand was in the neighborhoods, and that the neighborhoods of Detroit are underserved from a retail perspective, from a housing perspective, from almost every perspective. The demand either it wasn't cared about or wasn't respected, but either way, it was significantly underserved. And the Congregation, it's packed all the time. I definitely see a world where 12th Street is back to how it was pre-rebellion, where it's filled with bustling commercial activity, stores. We love to see mixed use development, mixed income development, a lot of infill. So, I see a world where, all of Claremont and Atkinson and 12th Street, Rosa Parks is filled with, dynamic mixed use, mixed income housing and development.
So what's exciting about that is also now that you're living right in the area, you're rebuilding your home and for the future of Maverick, right? So there's something really beautiful. There's a great story there. But one of the things I want to talk about, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about Reed and this article you wrote where you really just said, look, you're doing this good stuff, and we've talked about it with so many people who are doing housing development, that you really want to serve a broader population and include more low-income people, but you need subsidy for that. And so can you talk about the journey where you started realizing, or have you always wanted the subsidy, and where you are right now that led to you writing this amazing editorial in Crain's?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said earlier, we started our own Atkinson with single-family homes, and we built that portfolio up, this concentrated in pretty much single-family, multi-family portfolio up to about 100 houses and units across a number of neighborhoods. We've shifted since 2020, investing in multifamily housing. Everything is naturally occurring affordable. They call it NOAH, NOAH, as opposed to capital A, regulated affordable. So all of the work that we've done in Detroit, we now have a portfolio of about 250 units. It really focuses on providing housing that's economically accessible to people. You don't have to pay $4,000 to live in a one-bedroom apartment. There are a lot of other developers in Detroit. A lot of black developers are focused on this housing as well. They're not receiving any subsidies. They're not receiving
that was a
any
big
tax
story
breaks.
last year.
Most of us. That's what we're doing. We're seeing that there's a need. We're scraping pennies from friends, from family, from banks, from whatever lenders are available to invest in the places that we live.
So what's the gap then?
From a development perspective?
Yes.
If you look at how it's not just low-income housing, if you look at most of the housing, looking downtown, whether it's for low-income folks, for wealthy folks, all of it's subsidized. And the big multifamily, the big commercial developments that you're seeing, in downtown, they have a wide array of subsidy, low-interest loans, tax breaks, grants that they can apply to make sure those deals are economically solvent.
Before you go on, how many of the developers in that area are African American?
In Detroit?
In the downtown area where you have that heavy level of subsidy. Is it, don't give me a number, just a proportion. Do you think it's like 20%, 30%?
I don't personally know a ton of developers, black developers, developing downtown.
Yeah, it's mostly white. It's safe to say, right? And I think it's important to call that out in a city which prided itself on helping black business owners be established, in a city that really helped to create a black middle class by empowering black folks at all levels of the development game to get involved in helping to rebuild our city and build things. That now you have a city where not only the residences are mostly white, the businesses are mostly white, but also the developers are mostly white. And so you have this concentration of wealth away from a black middle and upper middle class and towards these white wealthy people, because a lot of them are billionaires. Is that a safe statement? I know that you are not a person to make unsafe statements. I appreciate your caution. But I just want to set some context here.
Yeah, that is certainly, REIT's mission. Our mission is to advocate for black developers in Detroit, Metro Detroit, and Michigan, so that they can rebuild their communities, whether they want to develop downtown or midtown or the neighborhood on 7 Mile, wherever. We feel like our folks have the intellectual power, they have the resourcefulness. Our community has all the skills that a lot of these large developers downtown have, but lack resources, opportunities, balance sheet, et cetera.
Yeah, I really couldn't believe it. I remember it vividly because we interviewed REIT member Brandon Hodges last year when the Michigan Strategic Fund came down with that pandemic money. And Detroit had one lone recipient in the organization that is what was it? The Downtown Detroit Partnership. It was insane to me. So talk a little bit about why a policy advocacy is so an important tenet for the REIT group.
No, absolutely. So REIT was actually founded by Jason Jones and Alicia Moss in 2018. And it came out of the Capital Impact Program, and it was a way to get resources to aspiring developers, get them connected, and get them information. In the summer of George Floyd, we had a lot of corporations, a lot of states, cities making promises to folks, to black folks, people of color. And a lot of developers here feared that there was no mechanism to hold these folks to account once the peak around George Floyd had abated. And I think we've certainly seen that a lot of the policies or promises that were made during that time have been unkept. So a number of developers got together and said, hey, instead of recreating a new organization, let's kind of latch on to this existing one founded by Jason and Alicia and broaden its mission to not just provide resources for aspiring developers, but provide advocacy for the entire black development ecosystem. And that's what we've done. So REIT now has about 130 members, from folks who have never built a home to folks who have done hundreds of millions of dollars in development, some in Midtown, some in downtown. We really do run the gamut within REIT, and our goal is to actively steward resources to the black development community in Detroit and Metro Detroit. And we need to do that as a body because of each of us, we each have our little portfolios, we each have a ton of experience and know-how, but individually, that doesn't really matter. As a collective, though, as a constituency, we felt if we could come together, we could actually demand a bit more accountability.
Yeah.
And if you look at what happened, like you mentioned, the MEDC put out a program where $100 million was coming to the state of Michigan to fund housing and neighborhood or civic projects. And we at REIT, we sat there and we were surprised and a little taken aback that all the money that Detroit got did just go to downtown. So in a city where over 70% of the folks are black, 86% of the people actually don't live downtown, they live in the neighborhoods. 100% of these resources went to white developers who were doing projects, in downtown. And we think, hey, any city needs you want a strong downtown, you want a strong nucleus, a strong job center. But we also got to put money in the places where it's needed, in the places where the people are. So what's good, I say this in the op-ed, what's good for for the neighborhoods is good for Detroit. There are 550,000 people who live in the neighborhoods of Detroit. What's good for black people is good for Detroit. So what's good for both of these communities is going to be good for the state. So you also look at Michigan right now is one of the few states in the nation with a declining population. And the governor's made it a mission to increase the population, and she's appointed a task force, and she's really putting an emphasis on it, which is really, really important. But a lot of states that are growing in population, the thing they share in common are thriving cities.
Thriving neighborhoods in particular.
Thriving neighborhoods,
Because a lot of young people, when they only see, downtown developing, first of all, a lot of them don't feel welcome downtown. Some do. But the other thing is where you live most of your life, you want to see progress there. When I talk to young people, and we ask young people, I believe at our last podcast, we were interviewing a couple of young people, do you plan on staying in Detroit? And one of them was like, at first I just thought I needed to leave. This mindset, I have to leave. And when you see that progress happening in neighborhoods, I'll tell you when it happened was when Dennis Archer became mayor. Housing prices in neighborhoods skyrocketed. All of this redevelopment was happening in neighborhoods. And people I grew up with started moving back to Detroit. They're like, oh, Detroit is a place of opportunity. They saw it as such. It can't just happen downtown. And it can't just happen with people who are moving into studios and micro studio apartments, because those people aren't here to stay. For the most part, if you're living in a studio apartment, you're at some point in time going to want to move into a larger place. And we're not building those future homes for those people either. But the other thing is, and I want to challenge this because I've heard people on either side of it. It seems to me as though when you're looking at housing stock, and first of all, families can't live in studio apartments, but when you're looking
or the multi-family units that the city is subsidizing right now, we're talking about a family of 3 or more. I mean, there's literally no room, but go ahead.
Well, when the city subsidizes a lot of these places downtown, they say, look, we have 30% of our units are affordable. But what they're not acknowledging is that these affordable units are not spread equitably among the apartment unit sizes. So you don't have a 33-bedroom home that in apartment, to the extent there are 3 bedrooms being developed in Detroit, you don't have a 3-bedroom unit being made available at a subsidized price. It's always the studio and sometimes the 1-bedroom. And so we are really not building housing for families, right? Because families need more space. And if you lose a family, you're losing 4 people. If you lose an individual, you're losing 1 person. So the fact that we are losing families faster than we're losing single adults means something about depopulation in the city and then, of course, the state. But the other question I have is about the cost. Is there a cost differential between renovating a home and building from the ground up?
It depends. So it depends on the scale and the degree of renovation. So if you're looking at a multifamily building that requires an elevator, that's probably 3 at minimum 3 or 4 stories. That requires a full gut rehab. So I mean new roof, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, drywall. The cost to rehab that is right now very similar, if not maybe even more expensive when you include the masonry work we've got to do for our beautiful old buildings. It could be more expensive than a new construction.
What about
building.
a 1,200 square foot home?
Compared to what?
A new 1,200 square foot home. It feels like you cannot build anything new that is like a 1,200 square foot property.
On a smaller format, again, it varies depending on amenities and the price of the land, et cetera. But I do think, depending on, again, the degree of rehab, that on a smaller format, a rehab should cost less than a new construction single-family home. So
we're looking at new construction single-family homes, and we're seeing people saying, getting estimates of, say, $100,000 to $115,000 to renovate a single-family home that is in pretty bad condition. Can you build a new home that is 1,200 square feet for $120,000?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think the construction prices that I've seen are so high for new construction, all of the materials and everything like that, that it vastly outweighs the cost of renovation, like not by insignificant amounts, even when you're talking about apartments. And so there's now, like you said, apartments, when you have the larger systems, it may be, what I'm saying is comparing renovating a single family home to building an apartment, a new apartment, the costs are still lower to renovate a single family home from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like the money would go a lot further if we allowed for renovation with some of our public subsidy dollars. But our public subsidy does not support that now, does it?
There isn't an efficient go-to subsidy to rehab single-family homes that I know of, at least. And that is the dominant topology of housing stock in Detroit.
It is. And so there's an opportunity gap between what we could be doing inside of neighborhoods to fix up homes and make them available at an affordable rate and what we are doing, because we're steering our resources to a downtown area and to a typology that does not really support what's happening in families, what's happening in neighborhoods. So you make some recommendations in your
Can I just really quickly say, too, that that's also the choice of the administration in power.
Of course.
Right? When we talk about, what's in a consolidated plan, the mayoral administration has the power to choose, right? And essentially the point that you're making in the op-ed that I took away with is that there is an intentional choice to invest in certain things. And when you make that choice, you're also making an intentional choice to ignore other conditions, right, in the city, including, in neighborhoods where the vast majority of people live. And that's a critique that I continue to levy on this administration.
Agreed.
And it's, so what the other thing that I would tag on to that is that, we're looking at, who's going to be mayor next. And I think that whomever is going to, want to be a contender, we have to have a serious conversation about housing and housing policy in the city.
We need it at every level of government. We need the president, we need Congress, we need the governor, and we need the state legislature, the mayor and city council to really prioritize rebuilding neighborhoods in the nation, not just in Detroit, rebuilding homes. It is a sustainable practice. Every time we tear down a home, we are just eliminating materials and things that have been invested in those homes. We're releasing toxins into the air, and we're also losing opportunity to preserve whatever the value is. What I've been told is like with a brick home, when you preserve those bricks are so expensive that replacing them would just be cost prohibitive in many instances. And yet we are just, crumbling them and allowing them to go into landfills. So I guess my thought is that there's a sustainability value in reinvesting in the housing stock in our neighborhood. And one of the things you talked about was some of the unique beauty in some of these single family homes that you're not going to replicate with a lot of new stuff.
I think the first thing is recognizing that we're in a housing crisis.
Yes.
So that means we have to move a little bit differently than if this was just sort of a more, theoretical problem. And there's a crisis. We have across the nation we have millions in housing deficit from a unit perspective, and Detroit's just a symptom of that. In Michigan, I think the Michigan now the new state housing plan requires Michigan to develop 75,000 units. And so I love the fact that Michigan, put out a plan, because now we have something we can measure and we can backfill to make sure that we're moving from a funding perspective and allocating resources in a way to target the plan. Yeah. And you can't actually improve a problem if you can't identify it and have a way to track your progress, towards identification. So I think that was a huge step, and we were incredibly at READ, really glad to see it. Now the question is, now that you have this goal, how do you and you acknowledge it's a crisis, and within that plan, Michigan for the first time acknowledged that there's a racial equity component of this plan, that they want to help. They recognize that there's a racial wealth gap, and they want to take steps to measurably reduce that gap. So we'd love to see, at READ, a quantifiable plan, a matrix that assesses, what is the efficiency of the subsidy dollars? How much subsidy dollars is producing how many units?
And helping how many people, right? So I just want to point out, the reason I'm asking the questions about renovation versus new construction is because everything favors new construction in our state. And it's more inefficient in many ways and more unsustainable in many ways than new construction. If you're looking at new construction, you're almost never looking in a neighborhood like the neighborhoods in the city of Detroit, because you already have houses there. And so either you're going to have to rise all the houses there, you're going to have to do infill housing. And so it puts neighborhoods at a competitive disadvantage. And you're right. I mean, I saw a survey that said that there were 7 million chronically homeless people who could not afford housing, and 14 million chronically vacant units in the nation. And so that math is not mathing in my point of view. We should be able to match some of those 7 million people with some of those 14 million properties, but it can't happen without intentionality and without prioritization. If you had to prioritize at REED new construction versus adaptive rehab, do you guys have values around that, or are you sort of neutral on that and just wanting to see more things go into neighborhoods?
I think at REED, we really want kind of quantifiable accountability. So we love the fact that they're stated targets, but we want to make sure that the subsidy, as it goes to creating affordable units, is done on an efficient basis that you can actually measure. But housing is complex. So housing is incredibly complex. There's no hard and fast rule that says new construction is best or rehab at best. Everything takes, it's case by case. Rehab is very, very difficult. It is. One of the advantages to new construction is that you have way more consistency of approach. You have way more certainty, typically, around your costs. The exact opposite is true of rehab. It's very difficult. There are fewer contractors. The costs can be unknown from beginning to end. Your contingencies are typically much higher. You have to deal with a lot of pre-existing conditions. So we do need a balance.
But if you are trying to house Detroit families, and we have people who cannot afford housing, and you're trying to attract families here, and as you pointed out, the mismatch between what people are earning and what housing is costing is actually growing. If you're trying to do that, then it seems to me that putting resources behind something that's difficult, rather than saying it's just too hard, let's not do this anymore, which is what seems to be what the city and the state are saying in terms of their investment dollars. It feels like it kind of leaves so many people out, because from everything I've read, new construction is just too expensive to house poor people. And so I feel like when we say affordable, it's such a neutral, it's a term that doesn't mean a whole lot, because affordable covers so much. I'm talking about housing poor folks. I'm talking about housing low-income folks, not just affordable. And so when you're looking at that, it seems as though some intentionality that says, let's give this a try, seems to be important.
Absolutely. Anything we do, it has to be done with intentionality. It's got to be done with, I think, rigorous, analytics, rigorous assessments, whether it's new construction or whether it's rehab. And it's got to be a thought, too, being that we are in a crisis, are we efficiently spending the subsidy dollars that are coming through the federal government into our state? And in some cases, a lot of cases, to your point, and particularly in the neighborhoods, particularly if your goal is to house families, rehab is probably the way to go. In other cases, different topologies. But it's got to be done in a way where folks know the rules in advance. So you know that when you have a project, you know what funding sources are available to fund your project. You know what projects are likely to be funded. I think some of our community, we struggle with that lack of transparency to really understand, all right, what resources are available to fund my rehab or fund my multifamily construction? And
I know we have to go, but I just want to say, we have actually subsidized the rehab of all kinds of buildings downtown.
Of course.
Which, as you pointed out, are more expensive to rehab than in the neighborhoods. You have to figure out, how are you going to get the book catalog back and running? And you've decided this is a good use of the public purse. When I talk to families, when you look at a history of a tax foreclosure crisis, when you look at a history of predatory lending and a mortgage foreclosure crisis, and you look at the history of people being displaced, what do people who live in neighborhoods want? I think efficiency should be one goal, but I think another goal should be sustainability and the inclusive social well-being of residents who are still here. How can you help me live inside of this community? Because a lot of homes that people are living in, quite frankly, they need to be rehabbed as well. And so if we don't have rehabbed dollars for occupied units, if we don't have rehab dollars for small landlords who are trying to hold on and who are maintaining these properties on behalf of tenants who can only afford to pay $400 to $500 a month, then we're going to continue to just be a replacement society where we just build new, get rid of the old, wait until it falls apart, and then build something new, which usually has, in a lot of instances, lower quality because you're trying to cut corners. I think it's important for us to call out the rehab of homes as an important priority inside of Detroit. Not the only one, but an important priority in front of inside of the neighborhoods.
All right,
so I'm hoping that we can work with READ on helping to also quantify what some of those goals might look like in our neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right, we gotta go. We gotta go. We can have this conversation all day. David, once again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
All right, y'all, it's time for shout outs. So anybody want to shout anybody out?
I already shouted out Jackson Copel and Alex and the Sierra Club and all of the Eastside Environmental Action entities, our staff at ECN. I want to thank you guys for fighting the good fight and making some progress in the rate case.
Mm-hmm. David, any shout outs?
I want to shout out Detroit and its history and its future. And, I'm more excited than ever to keep doing the work in the city's neighborhoods for this rehabbing or new construction, working with Donna and ECN. I think the future is so bright. There's so much opportunity. We're at this perfect juncture where there is significant resources coming from the state and federal government for housing. We've got a recognition that we're in a housing crisis. We've got a recognition that there's racial inequity. This stuff hasn't happened before in a really, really long time, at least. So I'm bulled up. I'm excited of the work READ is doing and looking forward to getting more black folks, more black developers into really great real estate projects all through the city and the state.
All right. We love it. We want to thank you all so much for listening. And until next time, catch the wave.